As regular listeners to this podcast will know, I'm a bit of a fan of the Roots revival reggae movement that is coming out of Jamaica at the minute. It was huge last year, and I think this year, 2019, it is really going to blow up. There is some absolutely staggeringly good sounds, music, lyrics coming out of the country at the minute. None more so than my next guest, who I am so excited to have on here, because this album is absolutely staggering. I don't know where to begin to describe it, really, but it is staggering. And this is Bay C. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, man, give thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation. Shout out to the listeners. And thanks for this that compliment to the album. I really appreciate it.
I haven't even started yet. So this album, you know what? I don't even want to call it an album, really. I don't want to call it an album because it's not an album. It is a massive project, really, because it started all the way back in 2012, and what you've created is there's 10 tracks plus an interlude, but there's a music video for each track, and you've literally been globe hopping, traveling across the world, filming these videos, getting inspiration. And the album itself is a massively eclectic mix of all types of music. We go from sort of roots reggae, then we throw some dancehall in, then I'm hearing a bit of sort of Afrobeat R&B, then we get stung with some hip hop, and there's a sort of Middle Eastern vibe running through it as well. With this eclecticness, basically, did it come out of your travels, or was it a kind of conscious decision to make a project that was so diverse in nature musically?
Well, I think the album is just a reflection of my taste in music, and back before this project, it probably goes as far back as being a child and different musical influences from, like I'm a big fan of hip hop, of dancehall. Also, I was growing up listening to The Doors, listening to Fleetwood Mac, So it's really all the different influences, and the fact that I'm doing a body of work that represents me, I chose to make it as dynamic as possible in the effort to fully show the scope of my different flavors, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to that end, it's an absolutely roaring success, if you like. It's really hard for me, listening to it a couple of times now, it's hard for me to pinpoint sort of a standout track. There's one I want to ask you about because it sums up the, as I say, eclectic nature, and it's Poltergeist. It's a really fascinating track, both lyrically, it's so deep, it's just like it blows your mind, but musically it's also fascinating because I almost get from my part of the world in the UK, the sort of Ibiza chill out, almost trance electronic music is kind of huge, but yeah. I get some sort of Ibiza chill out there. Is that sort of fair to say? Yeah. The beat has a very smooth, relaxing vibe. Yeah. For me, it's hard for me to even put a description. I'm very curious to hear the feedback from each listener and hear how each person interprets the project. Because for me, the whole process of making the album was selecting beats from many producers, but each time I heard a beat that really felt like it would be part of the project, and I got inspired to write something that fit in with the narrative of the album, I just knew instantly that this had to be in it. So Poltergeist was one of those tracks where I did it in Berlin, and shout out to Dead Rabbit, the producer. He had a lot of beats throwing at me. We did some other projects before, but when I heard this beat, I was like, yo, I need this on my album. And we kind of just built it from there. The chorus is this airy voice. I think people know me as a deep voice DJ in dancehall, so I'm trying to show people other styles or other sides of my vocal range. And so a lot of times people hear this track and be like, yo, you singing the hook? And I'm like, yeah, it's me, it's just a different sound. So, and then the topic is really just a little deep, talking about, overcoming, those spiritual demons, but at the same time making it relevant to people all over the world, from refugees to the ghetto kids of Jamaica, you know what I mean? Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting you sort of say that about musical styles, because taking the album as a sort of whole, you go up to track 7 and then there's a brief interlude which appears to be a sort of a musical device, because then the final 3 tracks, it's kind of there's a musical shift, because we go, my girlfriend called it, she's labelled this style Saharan soul, basically, because we go from yeah, it's good. I know she's on it. From Holy Temple onwards, we go to the sort of Middle Eastern, North African theme. There's a definite shift there, but there's also a shift in the sort of lyrics and the feeling. It's almost as if that interlude represents one part of your journey is finished and another part is opening up. I'm really interested overall to know how did the whole album come about, as you globetrotted everywhere, and it does feel like a sort of a journey album.
Well, the journey started with the title track, Holy Temple. Back in 2010, I had put together the beat. I had the beat just came to me. I started to lay down the beat, and normally if I have something that's nice to me, the words come along with the beat. So the hook came to me instantly. I was at a place where, I'm evolving as a person, and I really believe that, there's more value in spirituality than religion, and there's more value in understanding a universal spirit of oneness, more than the divisive, rigid religious structure that kind of is haunting the world right now, in my opinion. So the song really was that kind of vibe to say, I had a vision of Christians and Muslims getting together, the Buddhist and the Hindu, the Rastaman and the Catholic, and we all are on this one page. So the song is kind of the theme, that's the anchor song for the entire album. And yeah, the last 3 tracks kind of continue on that vein of North African influences, because my wife is from North Africa, so I guess she has a lot of influence on where I go with the love songs on the album,
That shows another one of the overriding themes. There are quite a few love songs on there. There's Hero, which is then followed by Love Potion, and yeah, you can tell you love your wife. It's it comes through.
I hope she does.
It comes through in the album.
Yeah.
It was interesting you touched on unity, because that was actually one of the words that sprung out to me when I was listening to Holy Temple. There is that overriding again theme of us as a species, regardless of our religions and ethnicity. There was a real unity, sort of sums up actually the project extremely well. I sit back and I think a lot, and I think that the roots sort of revival reggae movement and the music is something we need at the minute as a planet and as a species, because politically we're in quite a dark place. I mean, obviously in America we have Trump, over here in the UK we have a very right-wing government as well. There's lots of problems in Europe. Obviously the Middle East is still burning, and Africa is again looking on a knife edge at the minute. Do you think this is a particularly bad time we're living through in history, sort of politically and socially, or is it just sort of peaks and troughs, and do you think we're going to overcome this?
Yeah, well, I think we're at a paradigm shift moment, at a game changer moment. I think with the advent of social media and the information age, I think those who want to be enlightened or who are curious are becoming more enlightened, and those who are blinded by the fluff of the social media are being led into misinformation and fake news and that kind of stuff. I always have a spirit of, I really believe that good will prevail. It sounds like a cliche, but I do believe that we're at a transitional stage, and I do believe that things will get better in time. I think you're absolutely right that more, conscious music coming from the reggae revival as well as other places in the world. Even hip-hop, you see people like Jay-Z and J. Cole putting on locks on their head. And I never thought Jay-Z would ever have locks on his head. Not to say that locks means that you're this pure person, but it just means that I think people are becoming a little more awoken. Yeah, I think it is a dark time, and I think it is us as a species to really wise up. But I do believe that our level of consciousness for the last 2,000 years has been minimally growing, and I think when we reach to a higher level of consciousness in terms of our spirit and using more of our brain capacity, that we would actually be a stronger and more responsible species. And I think that's what we're happening now. I think if you look at the idea of like a baby, and then you look at as they grow old, in the baby stage, you're like, everything is mine, and it's all about me. And then as you get older, you go through adolescence, and then you become an adult and a parent, and you understand the give and takes of life. I think we're still in an infant stage of consciousness. I think we're slowly growing out of that. So I think it's gonna be a little time, but I think in the long run, we will be all right, you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I think the way you put it into a time frame of sort of 2,000 years is extremely important, actually. I think that's, especially with politics and the way our politicians run and their ideas and their notions, we tend to view things as a species quite often through a very sort of small window of time, whereas we need to look over thousands of years to see where we've come from and where we're going to fully understand what we need to be doing to kind of rescue ourselves. Segueing on from that, Rastafari is a big influence, of course, on your album. It's a big influence in a lot of the revival movement that's coming out of Jamaica. In the UK, I live in London, and there's a big Rastafari community in London, but in the UK, we historically really have a problem in so much that the community is quite suppressed, it's not recognised, there's generally kind of negative stereotypes around that tends to be a UK problem. I personally think it's because the sort of message of the philosophy and the movement is one that the establishment really don't like at all, and they need to keep it down. But on your travels around the world, is that something you've noticed elsewhere, or is the Rastafari movement and its influences more open?
I think it's respected way more than one would expect around the world. I mean, I don't like to put things on one man's shoulder, but I think Bob Marley has really, it's
hard not to, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I really think he has paved the way for defining Rasta philosophy as, you know, in the term one love, redemption songs, this kind of thing, Africa Unite. So I think people look to a person who is of that Rasta faith as a beacon of hope, of positivity, of consciousness. And I do agree with you 100%. I think the powers that be are really scared of that. But I think deep down inside, coming back to the shift that I believe is happening, I think there are more people becoming more influential in the establishment who are of that influence as well, who are somewhat conscious. Some may use it to play politics, but I think deep down inside, where we are now compared to 50 years ago, there is way more influence of positivity. And that's where the change will really come between the establishment and the next generation of the kids that are still impressionable. But yeah, traveling to Europe and, you know, Asia, Africa, all over is definitely positive, respected feedback when people see us, you know what I mean?
You've again touched on a very important point there. I think there are certain politicians, we see it in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn's becoming the opposition leader, quite well respected in the US with sort of Bernie Sanders and Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party. There is a shift, if you like. I mean, overall, Holy Temple, what were you aiming for the listener to take away? Because for me, there was overriding themes, and you could feel there was a journey going on. But for me, it kind of, you went through a voyage almost of obviously life, but love, and then loss. But there was also an overriding amount of light in the album. I don't know how to describe it really, apart from light. It was a perfect example, I suppose, is if you I don't want to compare, so don't take this the wrong way, I'm not making a comparison, but if you compare it to A Matter of Time by Prodigy, which is a fantastic album, I chatted to him last year. staggeringly good album. However, it's extremely dark. It's kind of every song bar one is in a minor key, isn't it? And the themes and the sort of the influences. It's a dark album. Whereas there's overriding light with Holy Temple, and that's for me what I take away from it. And is that the kind of what you'd like people to take away? What were you aiming for people to hear and feel from it?
I think I don't know if I had one thing for people to take away other than it was more a self-expression. I really look at it like a piece of art. It's really down to the viewer to interpret it how it is, but I just put my heart in putting together a project that I felt fully represented me. For me, my vulnerabilities are on this album. The whole reason why it has taken so long to come up with this album is every stage along the way, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I kept on the perfect time and the perfect album and the perfect first single and all of that because of the commercialization of the music industry. But at the same time, for me, all along from the first song 6 years ago to the release, I've lost so many different friends and family members who have died. And losing, I touch on it in Not Forgotten, losing certain people around me like Little Joe and Delos and Jay Capri, and even my family members, Uncle Tony, Xavier, everybody that I've lost around me, Uncle Jimmy, has really brought home this continued rhetoric in my mind, which is that time is a no man. So I was just like, I'm getting this inspiration, I'm feeling this track, I have this track, I'm going to wait until the right time to record it. No, record it now. Once you die, you don't have the opportunity to share, especially if you didn't record it before. You don't have the opportunity to share whatever that inspiration was and how it may affect someone else. And it was really, really that kind of led me to say, complete this project and get it out. Don't look at it as something that you're aiming for the highest commercial success, but more something that will stand the test of time. That was it for me. My takeaway is I hope everyone really likes it, or as they listen to it more and more, they really appreciate the depth of it. And it's something that every time you listen to it, you hear something else, like it peeling away layers. There's a guy that I really, really like his music called Nick Drake, signed to Island Records. And I mean, I only know a little bit of his story, but he has this amazing album. He has a song called Things Behind the Sun, which is one of my most favorite songs at times. But when he came out in the 70s, he was like, he had a little hit and then he kind of faded away, and then he came to Chris Blackwell and played this album with Things Things Behind the Sun. And Chris was so blown away by the album that Chris said, we have to put it out now. And he died before the album came out. Chris put it out. When Chris sold Island Records, 20, 30 years later, the stipulation in the contract was that this album has to always be released by whoever has bought Island Records, because he knew that the album was probably ahead of its time and would stand the test of time. So for me, that's the takeaway for me, just having a project that 30 years later my kids can play it for their kids, and it can still be a true representation of a snapshot in time, my interpretation of time now. And
I really think you have absolutely achieved that. I mean, it is... you can tell you spent so much time on it, because it is perfection. And as you rightly point out, I mean, you have to... I've listened to it twice today, and I'm going to keep listening to it, because it is one of these pieces of work where you notice little intricacies all the time, and you catch things, and it's absolutely... It's a fascinating album musically, and it's staggeringly good lyrically. I could rant about it all night, but it's a brilliant piece of work, and you deserve all credit for what you have accomplished with this. It is fantastic. I mean, for me, there kind of feels like there could be an end of the journey in it. I'm not so sure though. So have you finished your journey? What's in store for you next? Is there still more to come? There's
more to come, because there are still many more tracks that has this feel that didn't make this album. So I already have more content that can be put out. in another album. But I guess for me, it's really just evolving. So this is where I'm at now. Let's see where I'm at in a year's time, 2 years time, and then capturing all that, you know. Part of this project also for me was like exploring vocally what people don't like, stepping out of your comfort zone, because people know me for a bass voice. So I've stayed in a dancehall bass, you know, bashment kind of space, and it would be safe, you know. But for me, it's really like, I'll tell you a quick story. Like when my third child was born, Amani, I was so excited, you know. I was the first person he looked at when he came into this earth, and I was like, wow. And I carried him home, and I was like, okay. I was so critical of what is the first song that I'm going to play for him, the first song that is going to influence his mind and all that, right? And I listened to all the songs that I had at the time, and I couldn't really find that one song or album that represented the message that I wanted to give him. And I think in making this album, that's where I was going for something that I feel like is timeless, something that is universal with the message, and something that I feel that can affect every age group. So for me, I'm going to really put my heart in the promotion of this for as long as it takes, and then I'm sure I'm going to get inspired to make other music along the way, and then we'll see where the next project comes from, when the next project comes out.
Fantastic. That's a great story as well. No, excellent. As a side note, my girlfriend, who was listening with me to the album a couple of times, she was a massive fan of TOK. So for her, I mean, her overriding, when she listened to it, it represents such a huge progression, both musically and lyrically, but also almost spiritually, from your days of, as you say, sort of dancehall and bashment in TOK to where you're at now. It's and your voice, I mean, vocally, you're so dexterous. It's absolutely, it's a stunning piece of work, Basie, and it's I hope as many people as possible can hear it, because it is essential listening, in my opinion. Basie, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to me. It's been a real pleasure, real privilege to speak to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time and inviting me on. And it's different when you talk to someone and they're just asking you the generic questions, but I really appreciate how you've really gone into the work, and you know, the questions you're asking me in itself is a compliment, or something that I'm very humbled and appreciative of. So thank you for checking out the project. Thank you for giving me this platform to share the music with other persons, make them more aware of it. And whenever you need anything, just holler at me, you know what I mean? Definitely.
That's very kind of you to say, and it is my pleasure entirely. Basie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, sir.